Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you around the world. Welcome to Trading Rebellion, your favorite show that happens every Tuesday and Thursday for updates on the crypto markets, macro situation, and even TradeFi. You're joined by myself, Nick Mancini, Senior Research Analyst and Director of Community at Trade the Chain, as well as CJ and Monty from Market Rebellion. Do you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Monty. If you don't know me by now, I'm a crypto trader, been in the space since about 2014, 2015. And yeah, CJ and I run a community of traders over here at Market Rebellion. And that's pretty much it. CJ, anything to add?
Well, we're in the studio today, so that's relatively
Yeah,
obvious.
it's noteworthy. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you guys probably know me. Just trade futures, nothing special.
He's the
Good to
cattle.
talk
He's the
about.
cattle
Yeah,
guy.
you guys have
I
the
gotta
supreme
get
setup
that.
today, so I wanted to give you your flowers. You know, you guys look way more professional than I do. You guys are in the legit studio today, so I think the vibes are going to be right from the Market Rebellion side today.
Yeah, we got some good stuff. We got some good stuff to share today, so I'm excited for today's episode. Should be a good one.
Sweet. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. Obviously, ETH is above 2K, so I know pretty much everybody is clapping and euphoric today. Bitcoin is around 30.5K. So we're going to go ahead and dive into those things. But the big news that happened this morning was, you can call it big news, you can call it interesting, whatever you want, but Twitter is now going to enable, at least granular price information in relation to stocks and crypto and quote unquote, the option to invest through eToro. So before we kind of dig into crypto and equities, we saw that Elon wants to kind of turn Twitter into X company, kind of the everything app. Do you guys feel that this is going to have any material long-term impact on stock and crypto trading? Or do you think this is just kind of a novelty, opens up a little bit more access to a little bit more people and is not too big of a concern in terms of market impact?
I think this is a relatively big step, right? Like we're not seeing too much positive price action on the back of it, but like this is what we need to happen, right? More and more legitimate on-ramps. eToro, definitely considered a legitimate company. And I think that any sort of like cross compatibility between Twitter and crypto exchanges is ultimately good to capture the younger demographic. One thing that CJ and I were just like talking about before we started the show is how so many of our friends gamble on sports but don't trade crypto. And I think, if Twitter starts making itself more of an everything company, like you said, and this is a step in that direction, then perhaps we do see like more and more adoption from that generation of people that currently aren't trading crypto, but fit the bill for being a potential crypto trader. And there are many of those people on Twitter. So, maybe
100%.
not the
I
most.
agree with you. Or CJ, did you have anything to say? I'm sorry.
No, I don't really have that much of an opinion. What were you going to say, Nick?
Oh, I was gonna follow up with, definitely agree with Monty. I think, any more points of access to the market is a good thing, because I think obviously we've seen gambling really become prolific with, DraftKings, FanDuel, these easy apps that gamify the experience. And you're 100% right on the gambling thing, Monty. I mean, if you're just a mathematics person in general, if you're gambling, an entire amount, if $100, you're going to lose that 100 if the bet doesn't go through. But in trading, you could potentially set a 10% stop and retain your 90 and still have more risk for the future. So if you think about it, trading's a bit of a better, it's a greater chance of success just from the mathematics standpoint. So I do feel that with more people who have access to these things, the growth of the market will continue, and money that is in other areas may start to trickle into risk assets and such. But talking about crypto in general, I think before we dig into anything else, something we cover quite often is DXY. We've been quite bearish on DXY, and I think obviously the boost in equities and most of crypto can kind of be summarized in this chart right here. And the fact that DXY has been on a slide, didn't make exactly fresh lows today compared to the February low, but darn close to it. So before we get into the equities and crypto really quickly on DXY, CJ, Monty, anything that stands out to you on this chart? We are kind of, where you would expect some support to come in, maybe a swing failure pattern. But do you guys feel that with everything, we're talking about de-dollarization, we're talking about, oil, the petrodollar kind of not being as, or the America's influence on oil being not as strong anymore. So the de-dollarization conversation has been very prevalent, and clearly it's been reflected on the chart. So do you guys think that this is a time to start thinking about a reversal in the dollar, or do you guys think that this trend is going to continue?
I think that first you have to acknowledge that those narratives and that sentiment around de-dollarization is coming as a result of the dollar dropping. And, sentiment is always going to follow price, in my opinion. So as of now, I mean, it's in a trending market. So there's no reason for me to try to long something that's going to be continuing to make new lows. Same thing, we were talking about shorting gold earlier in the week. That has been stopped out as, that position has continued to make new highs, or that asset has continued to make new highs. So, I mean, they're trending. So we'll see. But I definitely wouldn't be looking to get long this unless we reclaim that level that you have highlighted there just above price.
Yep.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Or go ahead, Monty.
Yeah. All I have to add is that the DXY is, and FX in general, I've tested many different strategies on, all the currency pairs. And what tends to be the most successful are trend following strategies. So you don't want to go against the trend. You don't want to try and catch the bottom. These assets tend to trend, and the DXY is clearly in a downtrend right now. I wouldn't bet against that. I would bet for continuation rather than, a bounce from the lows. So just an observation, when it's trending positive, the trend is strong. When it's trending negative, the trend is also strong, and you typically don't want to go against that.
100%. And the best kind of advice that I've received in trading is, really don't fight the trend. It's better to trade with the trend than against it. And that's a core reason I think we've been talking about longs so much, at least in terms of crypto. I know CJ has been shorting some commodities with success, but in crypto, we've been mainly we've of course discussed both sides, but our bias has been long, considering the trend has indicated that long is still the favor of traders right now. So we understand that as DXY sliding down, that's likely better for risk. So let's go ahead and move on to Bitcoin before we dig into equities and commodities with CJ. But obviously, Bitcoin is now back around 30.5. The recent high that we experienced on the 11th was depends on the exchange you're looking at, but just over 30.5. So, and of course, yesterday morning, we were at, 30.6. So we need to get above this level to continue. But clearly, someone has been T-whopping Bitcoin, in my opinion, and it has done it shamelessly throughout the past 48 hours. So we've got Bitcoin moving higher, and we've got ETH moving higher. ETH busted above the 1940 resistance level and got up to 2K today and is now at 215. We have resistance at 2030 as demonstrated by the high back in August of 2022. If you get above that level, there is a lot of room to start roaming on the chart. So let's go ahead and pause it here, because I know Monty has some interesting topics about ETH BTC. I know CJ's been monitoring this rise, and clearly we've been a bit bullish, as has general market sentiment throughout the past week. The ETH upgrade went through successfully yesterday as well. So there's a lot of kind of bullish catalysts, in terms of, sideline money, inflation's going down. ETH upgrade was successful. Crypto is, the risk category when, commodities and equities are too risky, apparently. So the narrative right now is certainly bullish. But, I want to get you guys in here from your analysis, because I just kind of gave an overview. I'd love to hear, maybe we'll start with Monty in terms of what exactly you're looking at on these charts, and then we'll move from there.
Yeah, well, like you said, Nick, you and I have talked a lot about that ETH BTC chart. And if you want to go ahead and throw that up, I think now is a good time to talk about it. And you mentioned, right, 2030, highly critical level for ETH from a historical perspective. This is the ETH BTC chart. We're running right into the 20-period smooth moving average, which tends to act as a good indication of support and resistance. So we're seeing this confluence between, ETH strength into Bitcoin, and also ETH reaching a, not only a psychologically critical level of 2K, but also that, technically critical level of 2030. All of these are signs of, profit taking. And CJ, if you could go ahead and pull up just our the ETH trade insight that we recently published. We've been long ETH for quite a while now, but I decided to actually get out of ETH today. So this was a trade insight that we published back on March 21st. And, it was a lot of it, as you can see from this, was based on what we were seeing in the ETH BTC chart. And we got the move I wanted to see. We got that move up, that retest of the 20-period smooth moving average, which is the purple line on both of these charts. We got that. We hit the target of 2K. And one thing that we always talk about here at Market Rebellion is being disciplined. So I went ahead, took the majority, 2/3 of my position off the table, moved my stop loss up higher so that, I have less risk exposure. And ultimately, I'm looking to sprinkle those profits around into some altcoins because I do think that there is some pretty interesting opportunities across the board. And the reason why I think that there's some pretty nice altcoin action this morning, and the reason why I think that we could see continued altcoin price action, is because of what we're seeing over in Asia, particularly CJ and Nick and all the viewers watching. If you haven't been paying attention to the Korean stock exchange, the Kospi, you might want to start paying attention because this thing is ripping to the upside. And we need that Korean bid to come in because they are very much involved in the altcoin market. Nick, you talk about it all the time about how, if you look at, the 5 biggest coins that the Koreans are trading, it tends to be a good indication that those coins are about to pump. But in general, their market right now is very risk on. And I think that that's why we're seeing such outperformance from the alts relative to BTC. Now, that being said, I think we can use this as an interesting indicator as to when we may see the alts stop running. So that's what I'm waiting for, is for the Kospi to slow down. Right now, it's, full steam ahead, but it will pull back eventually. And when it does, I expect the alts to pull back as well. So if you haven't been paying attention, like, people refer to Bitcoin dominance a lot as a means of gauging altcoin sentiment or when you should be positioning in altcoins, or look at ETH BTC. But I think this is another tool you should add to your repertoire because the Korean bid is very important. And until we see some risk off price action in their stock exchange, I think they're going to continue to bid these altcoins up. And that's what we saw last night. And, just keep an eye on this one because as soon as it turns down, I expect alts to start selling off a bit.
Yeah, and before CJ hops in, I just want to, we talked about this last call, and just because Monty brought it up, we've been talking about the typically the most volatile coins, or the coins bringing the most value on the chart in terms of extreme swings, are typically reflected by Upbit. So Bitcoin, number 1 coin right now with 10% of the volume. Arbitrum, number 2, 8% of the volume, 2 of the biggest moves recently. Solana, also major move recently, 7% of the volume. ETC, big moves. Serum, I have not been tracking, but obviously ETH, number 5, Dogecoin. So these coins, as long as they're taking up large swaths of volume on the Upbit chart, should definitely be on your radar for trading it, whether you're swing trading or even scalp trading, because obviously they're going to breed big swings. So sorry to interrupt there, CJ. I'll go ahead and bring your chart back for a follow-up to Monty.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Kospi has been one of the most powerful in terms of uptrends for the Eastern indices, but Nikkei very nice bullish price action as well. HSI has been more or less neutral, but we have had a decent uptrend. And Bitcoin's done very well ever since we've bottomed out here. So those indices clearly very important. Also, NASDAQ, I think, is really interesting. Going into yesterday, if I got to go back and chat and pull this up, but we had record amounts of shorts, specifically like hedge funds, going into CPI. And I remember the last time we had that, and we actually had a higher number, but price continued to close up just because of the amount of shorts in the market. So this is what we saw prior to CPI, and a lot of those shorts are just getting squeezed out of NASDAQ today, as well as a lot of the other equity indices. So, I've kind of made my ideas quite clear. I'm just holding Dow. No reason to get out of it until the COT data gives me a point. But I do think we're starting to press the upward limits of this like so-called hated rally within the equity markets. Like this is, of all hated rallies, this one is definitely going for the record. So, we'll see ultimately how that resolves, but not a whole lot to do in terms of like position adjustment. I do have some select altcoins I'd like to talk about. But in terms of like,
before you dig into those alts really quick, just because we mentioned CPI and I believe we just PPI may have got mentioned as well. I wanted to quickly just give some context to that. And we did talk about this on Tuesday's show in relation to whether or not we were bullish or bearish on the week. And obviously the big data point was CPI. So if we look at the data, last month was 6%. This month is 5% year on year. So major drop in CPI. But I think what CJ was alluding to is that there was a slight rise in core CPI, and core CPI is CPI minus food and energy costs. And core CPI is also what the Fed typically tracks closely in terms of overall inflation, and which is what the market will track, considering we're kind of hinged on Fed actions right now. So CPI was lower, much lower. Core CPI was slightly higher, but the PPI print this morning, and I think that's why we're seeing such a continuation of what we saw yesterday, was that PPI dropped to 2.7% from 4.9%. And PPI is basically producer manufacturer inflation, where CPI is consumer inflation. So if it's costing less month over month, year over year to produce things, it should, eventually lessen the burden on consumers, and based on prices rising over time. So those are two big reasons. And of course, core CPI or core PPI major drop to 3.6% from 4.5. So just to kind of explain why the dollar is moving lower, why equities are moving higher, and why crypto is also getting such a large boost as well. So apologies to interrupt there, CJ, but just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a, understanding of what's going on with these data points. So bringing your chart back up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been interesting. Like, let's say, for instance, if you didn't have this amount of shorts in the market and we just finished a drastic uptrend, and let's say you had a positive number, a favorable number for inflation, like what we got, and price closed down. Like, I don't know. I focus less on the overall outcome and number and more about the positioning going into the event. I think that's really the only thing that matters, because at the end of the day, the economy is not the stock market, although many will conflate the two, just like on CNBC and so forth.
One thing that you've really incorporated into your analysis recently, and that I think has been one of the most accurate indicators in terms of like looking at how traders are positioned, is put call equity ratio. And I know that we talked a little bit about it this morning on our daily show that we do over at Mark Rebellion, but I think it's worth mentioning for this audience as well. We saw put call equity ratio get pretty high as we, started this quote unquote hated rally, like as you like to put it, but now it's coming back down to earth. What do you make of this put call equity ratio in terms of possible price performance going forward in ES?
Yeah, so I think it's indicative of shorts giving up a little bit, but ultimately we'll see once COT data is released this Friday or today later. So we'll do some analysis there. But in terms of like how I like to use the put call equity ratio for ES, is that a pattern that you'll see a lot, and this is like sentiment trading basically. So I have this red line up here. Every time we've gone above this red line, and what this means is that people are buying 1.2 times the amount of puts as they are to calls. So they're just stacking the puts, getting really, really scared and hedging, or doing whatever, buying portfolio insurance for a crash. So every time we have these levels, it's indicative of massive just panic. And we have seen some local bottoms. It's not always perfect, but I think this was a great anomaly instance of a local bottom, because everybody was like, all right, bear flag to new lows, bear flag to new lows. And, we basically got the opposite. And now we've got one of the largest declines in terms of equity put call ratio. So yeah, that's probably indicative of a lot of people buying calls or flipping bullish, which makes me, a little bit more like inclined of the idea of like, maybe this is like the end of the hated rally. I don't know. It feels to me, and I could be wrong, but it feels like we're more close to the end than we are to the beginning of this echo bubble, or whatever you want to call it, in the stock market and crypto market.
Yeah,
Well,
with this put call,
go ahead, Monty.
I was just gonna say, with like the put call equity ratio, one way to look at it is like, I know there's a lot of crypto native people watching this. Think about it like the funding rate for Bitcoin, or like for liquidations for Bitcoin. Like when it's resetting, that's a good time to like think about investing. When there's a lot of levered longs or levered shorts in the system, that sets you up for some massive volatility. And when you see the put call equity ratio coming down like this, it just tells you that people have less conviction in the downtrend. The puts are becoming less prevalent, and people are starting to buy calls. And now that that's happening, so far this year, the contrarian perspective has been basically the way to go the entire time. So now that I'm seeing the put call equity ratio fall to the degree that it is, I'm considering getting short equities. I could name a few, but I think I'll save those for our customers over at Market Rebellion. But I think that seeing this number come down, it reminds me of like a deleveraging event. And now we could see price finding that echo bubble finally pop, and price come back down in a lot of these major indices.
Yeah, so that was something I actually wanted to talk about, and I'm going to pull up the Bitcoin chart really quickly as CJ preps his next stage. But we're starting to get the calls, and just kind of basing it off of your initial standpoint of closing your ETH trade, which 2K, nice round number. Market typically likes nice round numbers, and of course Bitcoin is at 30K, nice round number, with resistance up to 32K. So if we just kind of redraw some lines here, obviously, this is the resistance that's next up, top of the previous range that we traded in. We're obviously below the low of that range, and there's a swing failure pattern lower. So, if we're just talking about when is the good time to start thinking about a top in the rally, now we have a few indicators. Obviously volume has been quite low since Binance stopped the zero fee trading. So, this was a big kind of zero fee trading area for Binance. So I'm kind of taking all this volume with a grain of salt. But we do obviously have lower volume. We're at, the nice run numbers. ETH is in a very, similar position. I know I've got all these, lines here, but we talked about resistance being up here at about 2030, and we're just sitting under that resistance and have been unable to break through so far. So you're starting to hear a lot of people call for, stacking shorts, timing a reversal. But we also did discuss the fact of don't fight the trend, and if you're talking about a knife catch, I always how to immediately inverse the chart, but here we go. I can inverse the scale. If you're talking about a knife catch, then if you're shorting here, you're literally trying to catch a knife. So we're getting mixed signals in the chart, and of course, we never recommend that anyone just start piping trades without a good plan. And I don't think you should be too long or too short at this level. But let's open up the discussion. What do you guys want to see for a confirmation of entering shorts on, let's say crypto in general, top, major assets, but, also talking about equities in terms of the NASDAQ, in terms of the Hang Seng Index, the Korean index that you just discussed, they're all kind of correlated to some degree. So I currently am still warring with myself internally on which side to pick at this level, but my bias is still long based on, the dollar decreasing and a potential Fed funds rate topping now that inflation is starting to come off greatly. So I know I'm kind of ranting on this subject because there's so many different little points of nuance for this discussion, but CJ, Monty, what are you guys looking for in terms of reversal? It seems like you guys are closing longs and starting to rethink bias. So what goes on in that thought process for you guys?
I still do have some longs. I have some shorts kind of as hedges to those longs, but I'm not really aggressively shorting the market, I would not say, to your point of having it being in a trend. And I'm not even selling my Dow position because of that as well, even though today certainly could mark the top. I think, like I said, we are getting toppy, but the reason I'm not selling it and the reason I'm a little bit more reluctant to short just yet is because of how popular it is in the markets. It reminds me of when people were trying to buy the bottom all throughout 2022, and they were trying to catch the falling knife, and it didn't work, obviously. So not saying that we're going this high or that high on a relative basis in Bitcoin, but ultimately what would allow me to close my Dow position is seeing data come back to a little bit more neutral, whether that's this week or next week. But there's so many.
When you say neutral, do you mean like funding rates, or are you talking about like call ratio?
I'm talking like COT, like the commitments of traders, open futures positions for the Dow, ES, NASDAQ, things like that. We've seen a little bit more of a return to neutral in things like ES and NASDAQ. However, there still are shorts, but the indice with the highest amount of short interest still remains to be the Dow. So until those shorts get back to a more neutral level and are forced to cover, that's when I think the market has a higher likelihood of topping out. But I'm certainly not trying to front run that per se. I'm more trying to kind of protect my longs if this is the top. But with the equity market closed this weekend, with risk on price action and alts kind of heading towards a lot of their previous highs in the first round of the echo bubble, we could definitely see some risk on throughout the weekend. But like I said, it's very difficult to, like, I feel I feel that like warring within yourself. And I think anytime you feel that, it's usually better to just do nothing. But I'm not advising anybody do anything. I'm not making any recommendations.
Yeah.
We need a 100x trade, CJ. Anything less is unacceptable.
To CJ's point, doing nothing is a position. Like, people always think, I got to be long, I got to be short. No, you don't. You can be in cash, and you can be, sitting in USD and waiting for that war in yourself for one of those sides to prevail, and then you bet on that side. But for me, with Bitcoin and what I'm expecting in the next couple of days to weeks here is, I expect some consolidation right at this 30K level. We saw some pretty long consolidation at around 28K in terms of like Bitcoin standards. Like, people were trying to short this thing back down because we moved up so quickly on the back of, one, a liquidation cascade, and two, that banking crisis narrative. So we moved up, and people were trying to relentlessly short this thing. I remember looking at the funding rates and seeing that people were like just piling in on the shorts, and we managed to maintain that level. And I would not at all be surprised to see the same thing here at 30K, where people are trying to short it. They're getting squeezed out by spot buyers, and we just kind of consolidate above 30K for the next couple of months. That being said, I don't think that the alts are the same. I think Bitcoin will consolidate. I never short Bitcoin. We joke that it's like sacrilegious to short Bitcoin because you're probably going to get squeezed.
It's easier to short the BTC pairs. It's just like infinitely. I never want to call anything easy, but you're putting the odds of success, I think, much greatly in your favor because you're kind of smoothing out some of the macro volatility when just shorting an altcoin as opposed to BTC.
Exactly. And if you look at the charts, from a BTC perspective, you'll see that a lot of them look very, very weak and are potentially, going to continue to slide for the foreseeable future. So, like when I see Bitcoin moving up from 28 to 30 like this sort of level movement, it reminds me very much of 2018, climbing out of a bear market. We get this level price action. Eventually people flip bullish, get FOMO, and then we, get that rapid increase in price. I still think that's a long way off. But for now, I think consolidation around 30K while some of the altcoins slide is kind of a reasonable expectation for the next week or two.
Yeah, and just piggybacking off of one of your comments, talking about consolidation, we spent 23 days in the range, between 26.5 all the way up to 29. And of course, some of these wicks were just wicks in time. So the range was even really tighter for the majority of that 23-day period. So Monty is certainly correct. With too much leverage can be a bad thing. Even though leverage is certainly what got us to 69K, at the wrong times and in the wrong periods, it can be a bad thing, because if there's too many longs or too many shorts, there's an easy game to play for market makers and whales within the range, because everybody's trading for a breakout, right? So if everybody's trading for a breakout, they're hoping for kind of the outlier trade, and there's obviously there's a larger way to then cut those trades out of the system and decrease the leverage for a move in the future. And a lot of the reason, you hear us say short squeeze is because, if you just look at the data, most of the leverage has been washed out on these moves higher. And that has been mostly shorts being stacked up and trying to fight the trend, as we said, is likely not the best decision for you. And clearly anyone who's been fighting for the past, we can extend it out to even a broader time frame. This is 32 days of pumpage since March, and pretty much shorts have just been blown out for 80 to 90% of those days. So clearly shorting has not been your friend on the Bitcoin chart, and CJ and Monty very much giving the correct analysis, in my opinion. So let's move over to ETH really quickly, because Bitcoin has kind of been pushing the entire market around. Bitcoin dominance has increased. ETH BTC chart has decreased, but ETH just went through a pretty major upgrade. So and it's tagging the resistance level, which is, like we said previously, was the high back in 2020, or not exactly 2022. Let me just go ahead and make sure I'm talking about the right time frame. The August of 2022 was that previous high. So the upgrade happened, and I actually have a nice little tool for everybody. So this actually shows the number of ETH withdrawals since the upgrade went through. 184,000 ETH has already been distributed. And clearly, looking at the chart, we've not seen any of that reflected in spot selling. So let's just go ahead. And I know neither of us are on-chain analysts. Neither of us are programmers or developers. So everybody listening, take that with a grain of salt. But just based on seeing this number of ETH withdrawals, so this is basically ETH supply that is now available to sell if they want to, coupled with the fact that prices since that happened yesterday are now up 5%. So do we think this is sustainable? Do we think this is just a reaction event to the success of the upgrade, or do we think that this is likely to continue?
Like I said earlier, I don't think ETH goes any higher than 2030 for the reasons that we mentioned. I do think this was a news-driven pump, and with news-driven pumps, you often get the hangover fade. Like basically, we've seen it with any asset that's pumped on a narrative. That is a nice upgrade for ETH. Don't get me wrong, but are these prices going to be sustained? Likely not. I think that seeing ETH BTC hit a critical level, seeing ETH hit that 2030 critical level, all of those things are telling me right now that I don't want to be risk on ETH and instead, you know, perhaps fade this narrative, look for some altcoins to perhaps sprinkle some capital into, or even short things like CFX. But for the time being, you know, I'm risk on, so not shorting anything quite yet.
What about you, CJ?
So it was very interesting. You didn't see a lot of hedging leading up to this event relative to the merge, but you saw a lot of hedging start last night and then like just one day prior to the upgrade. And that was reflected in negative funding and more shorts, likely probably some of these spot holders who couldn't sell, or people just hedging their already in profit or profitable ETH positions that they've been holding. So, you know, we'll see, but it seems that some of that funding has been reset to neutral in the short term, but you know, that's going to be definitely something to watch. I have a couple altcoins to talk about in terms of like plays, but other than that, I don't have really much else.
Yeah, I just kind of drew a couple of lines here, and this is typically how I approach trading: is just draw what I think are the scenarios for the next 24 to 48 hours, and then try and pick what my bias is based on the data available. And just judging by, you know, if we get another hour wick like this, I think it's going to be really tough to get back to 2030 anytime soon, meaning in the next couple of hours. So I believe if we close, you know, with a little ugly doji like this and another kind of, you know, almost a tweezer top, but not exactly, then feel like we'll probably at least come back to 1990, maybe as low as, you know, 1985, which is kind of that low from earlier today after that initial doji. So I would feel that that's probably likely. So I may look for some more longs for potential another, you know, spike up to 2030 to kind of meet the round number. Because again, we trade crypto a lot. To everybody who may not trade as voraciously as us, crypto will like to scam you. And market makers will try to make your life difficult. So I'm sure you'll see a lot of shorts come in at the 1990 level if we get there. Could bring another squeeze to 2030 where everybody tries to long the top again, and then that's where we come back down. So that's definitely something to watch out for. And again, if we get up to 2030, I'm probably in camp Monty and probably throwing a couple of shorts at the board just for a potential flip back to supports down here at 1950, or just a general rejection and subsequent deviation, considering you know, just it is scary to know that there's 184,000 ETH available to sell if anybody would like to. So I'm certainly not bullish on ETH, and I don't think you should be shorting here. But, you know, if we close beneath, you know, the 2020 level, then, you know, you may get some good shorts down to at least form a quote unquote Monday range or something like that. So just my thoughts on ETH. But CJ, let's go ahead and bring your charts up, because I know you got a couple of alts that you want to talk about, and I'd love to kind of hear what your thoughts are in relation to, of course, the Bitcoin trades as well.
Yeah, so this one, a little bit more positive momentum this morning. It's kind of dropped off ever since, but I've been watching a few altcoins. Aptos is interesting to me based off how Solana has pumped recently. I think that you see a lot of like chain reactions. It was interesting, the Solana, I mean, obviously we have news around their phone, but also I think the FTX news definitely helped. So we'll see if Aptos plays catch up in like a chain reaction type thing. But either way, there's a very good defined risk below that local low, and you have the start of what looks like potentially a bullish engulfing candle. So at the very least, you know, risk to the downside is very, very clear. And, you know, perhaps it has a good weekend, perhaps it doesn't. Either way, I think it's an interesting potential set of circumstances. If you could please bring up the chart of SYN, Nick.
Oh, I think this is on your end, this chart. So I think it's you and Monty.
My bad.
No worries.
I like the dark mode. It looks nice. Anyways, you know, seeing a little bit of selling off, but I will say that this one, you know, this is deep within shitcoin land, I guess you could say, with a market cap of only $100 million.
That's deep in there.
And wait, what? Let's go to coin market cap for a sec. See what number it is on the board. The reason why I'm interested in it is because some small entity or family office bought 6% of the supply recently, and really, yeah. So it's 198,
Also,
100 mil.
didn't Jump or Alameda buy 1 million tokens as well?
I don't know who the entity was, but it was a very large one to buy, 6% of the supply, which is roughly, by $8 million worth, $10 million worth, maybe a little bit more. And in one
Synapse
clip,
also has
right?
a great bridge. They're one of my favorite bridges to use.
Is it like completely cross chain, like variety of chains, or is it just like an
Yeah, there's a
Arbitrum?
variety of chains. I used to use Rocket X, and then a couple of people were noting a few bugs with Rocket X, and I've also used Synapse, and I've never had a problem with them.
Nice. Yeah, you never know with the bridges.
No, I completely agree. I try to not bridge as much as possible, and also do cross chain swaps to just negate the bridge aspect, because all of my errors have come with bridges. So always do a small test transaction if you are bridging. That's my biggest suggestion.
Where do you bridge, or where do you do cross chain these days? Do you do that on Thorchain?
So like I said, I'll do Rocket X, and I'll do like a cross chain swap from ETH chain to Arbitrum or Optimism, or even Binance Smart Chain. But the chains that I typically use other than ETH are Phantom, Arbitrum, Optimism, and BSC.
Man, are you like the last person using Phantom?
Honestly,
I
I am definitely an outlier here, but I found Phantom to be my favorite chain to use in terms of speed and easiness, and their user experience on their apps. I know it's actually
I
a bit crazy,
definitely.
but it's been nice to use them, and they're very cheap.
Yeah, I like Phantom a lot too. I have a very I have a strong fondness for like Spooky Swap and stuff like that. But
Yeah, we were
in terms of
trading. Oh yeah, go ahead. We don't need to dig into all this. This is a whole segment in itself. So please continue with Sin.
yeah, so I don't really like that we're being rejected by the 20 period smooth moving average, but we'll see where price closes today. Either way, I think that it's exciting when you see a large entity accumulate or begin accumulating, and risk is defined very clearly for that one. So that might be like, we'll see. Obviously, risk on and risk off, and BTC dictates a lot, but this one, people are always looking for like diamonds in the rough, or like, you see this on YouTube a lot from crypto YouTubers who will be like, next 10 altcoins to 100x or whatever. But I do think there's interesting asymmetric payouts. I kind of view these altcoin trades like call options that don't expire. And like, especially in terms of risk management. Last thing I'll say today, and I just want to make this point very clear about risk management, is that when altcoins and euphoria like start going this high, ultimately this is like the 2 chart thing I like to do. It's like my capital in the market from the start of the move. I want it to be looking like this. So as prices are going up, I'm taking more and more assets out of the market. And overall, if done properly, over time, it should smooth your P&L curve to look something like this. Now, where are we on this curve right now? I would say we are approaching the tail end of this move. If we go up to 35 or 40, it'll probably happen very, very quickly. So the higher we go in price, ultimately, the more risky it becomes for these altcoin positions. But I think we still might have a little bit more of the tail end. Either way, got to be careful.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and great trades there. And it kind of made me think of just one thing that may be good to kind of close out with, and it's based on what Monty had mentioned prior, and that was alt strength in relation to Bitcoin. And to pull up the easiest example is, we just talked about this, long-term consolidation for 23 days, 22 days, whatever it is. And alts didn't really have too much fun. There are certainly outliers, and a few, tried to make new highs or make new local highs, but many have underperformed Bitcoin greatly. And the expectation is when Bitcoin tends to consolidate is when alts like to have fun. And we did not see that in the previous consolidation. So not arguing whether or not we will consolidate or go higher or go lower. I'm just saying, if we consolidate, do we feel that we're going to see the same type of alt cycle that we saw, for 23 days in end of March and early April? Or do you think that this next, potential consolidation, if it does happen, will bring with it, some bullishness for alts, or maybe more bullishness than we've experienced?
I said it earlier.
And I wasn't sharing my screen either, so I'll pull this up. Sorry, Monty.
No,
let me just go ahead and make sure that people understand what we're talking about.
You're good, man. I said it earlier, kind of jokingly, like, we really need the Koreans to step up, but it's not a joke. Like, we do need them to step up, especially when we're talking about altcoins. And if ETH does consolidate, around this 2K level, then that would be exactly what we talk about when we talk about flow of capital, where it starts with the move from Bitcoin. Then we see the move from ETH, and it's playing out right in front of our eyes, right? Bitcoin goes from 28K to 30K. ETH goes from 1,800 to 2K. Then the alts become risk on. And I think as long as the Kospi continues to climb, I think we see risk on price action in the altcoins. Now, not every altcoin is going to go up the same. Obviously.
Just the top 15 on Upbit.
That's a good start. That's a good starting place. But you need to pick and choose them carefully. And I think CJ's point earlier about looking at them relative to the Bitcoin pair is a very important one, and one that will be a deciding factor in which alts perform the best in the next market cycle.
I think it's ironic that you say the Koreans need to step up. They're probably having podcasts saying the Americans need to step up because we haven't bid at all.
Hey, I'm bidding.
If Sato is watching the stream right now, please counter trade us.
No, though. Hey, the Koreans need to step it up, but we need to step it up more. That is true. We not only in terms of we need more spot buying, less perpetual futures longs that are getting squeezed and driving us lower, less degenerate trading coming out of the West, less regulatory uncertainty. Like, they're probably looking at us like we're the ones that are the reason Bitcoin's not moving, and we probably are.
No, we definitely are.
No, at the burgers, as the world likes to call us in the trading world, the burgers are the Americans. We have, unfortunately, we've seen some good days, but we have been doing a majority of the selling in the cycle, from what I can tell on my end, which is also fascinating. So it does seem like the other parts of the globe are stepping up, or as we're stepping out, but there's always a critical mass point. The Americans cannot sell forever. And clearly the rest of the world is noticing both the strength and the opportunity, and kind of, what it means to have sovereign capital. And I think sovereign capital is probably a narrative and a term you'll hear a lot more often, I think, in the near future, because it's really a good summation of what it means to be in crypto. You're not in the traditional financial ecosystem. You're not, working with banks. It's your capital. It's managed by you. And you fully own, the rights to it as long as it's in, a sovereign wallet. So we'll hear that a lot more often. And I think, like I said, the rest of the globe is starting to realize that. And CJ and Monty are very correct. Americans need to do a better job. I don't think that's anything that us on the call or anyone listening can do. But of course, we can continue to lobby. We can continue to create trade volume, and we can obviously continue to make money in this market to make a better difference for ourselves and obviously everyone else there. So I think that's enough for us today. We're about the 50-minute mark. So a lot of stuff to cover today. Let's just go ahead, going into the weekend. Are we feeling bearish or bullish, or are we fully neutral looking at, stocks closing and the casino being open for the weekend before we chat? Final notes. Are we bullish, bearish, or neutral going into the weekend?
I wouldn't say I'm delta neutral but I have shorts that have potential to hedge. my other altcoin longs. I'm not bullish or bearish. I am somewhat neutral, but I think the reward payouts for some of these alts like, Solana or Aptos, if they continue to go up 10, 20%, that's a better opportunity than what you're going to likely see. Like, you just make so much more longing than shorting. So I'm inclined to kind of try and at least have some exposure for the last leg up here, if it is. And if it's not the last leg up and this is the top, then my hedges will work and I won't be exposed too much.
Listen, I think it's as simple as this. We see tonight another good night from the Kospi and the Nikkei. And I think this weekend we can see some alts really start to fly. They already have started to fly. We've already seen some altcoin outperformance. But I think this weekend, with the equity markets closed and bullish momentum heading into the weekend, things like, I'm talking things like ARB, things like SIN, even though they're coming up against resistance and have already made big moves, like, this is the flow of capital that we're talking about, moving downstream. So I am neutral on Bitcoin and ETH, but bullish on the downstream alts because I think that's where the capital is headed.
And I'm tending to agree with Monty as well. I will definitely, again, take the advice that we've been telling each other and not short Bitcoin. I probably will not be looking for ETH shorts either, as I'm a supportive bull of the market. I want my bullish brethren to have all the support they can have. But on a serious tone, I do think that it's time to start looking at alts, and I think we'll know relatively quickly whether or not the opportunity is available. I think if you're starting to get into longs at support or on mean reversions after they've already had a bit of a bullish boost, I think that's the right play right now. But there is certainly still the chance that Bitcoin either powers through or Bitcoin consolidates and alts continue to get the life sucked out of them. So I'm not all in on alts, but my trades right now are only on alts. And I am also trading APT, like CJ mentioned, also looking at CFX. Solana has been fun with the Sol phone. We didn't talk about that much today because I'll be completely honest with you, I don't think anybody really cares, but they are dropping a phone. So that's fun. But CFX, ARB, Ripple, Solana, AVAX, INJ, Didex, these are some of the coins that I'm watching, obviously heavily focused on L1s, but exchange tokens should get a nice little boost provided volumes end up rising with all this volatility. So that's, I think, something worth looking at. And then outside of L1s, potentially L2s, because ETH just rose. And typically when ETH rises, the L2s will get a bit of a euphoric run on the heels of that, or at least with ETH as well. So those are my three kind of categories to look out for. And I do agree with both CJ and Monty, best to check out the alt in the near future. So we will be back on Tuesday. We do this every Tuesday and Thursday here with all the information for you in relation to crypto, TradeFi, macro, and everything in between. We did not have any cattle futures today from CJ, but you might expect them next week. And we will, of course, capture all of the good trades and what happened over the weekend next Tuesday. So we will see you guys all next week. Hope you have a great day.